So, if you look at your feed right now, it's kind of interesting because we're not just seeing influencers anymore. We're seeing divorce attorneys talking about relationships and love advice, and doctors explaining health myths, and designers breaking down branding, and founders literally building their companies in public. And I feel like in this massive sea of opinions online, like people are really starting to be more into creators who actually know what they're talking about. Are you seeing this also on your For You pages?
First off, I am nowhere near ever hiring a divorce attorney, but in a very happy marriage. I also myself have a prenup, but I am so invested in the especially female divorce attorneys who are telling stories from their clients, from like, let's say, women who were married for 30 years and stay at home wives, and why when they divorced and did not have a prenup or did not have anything defined, like what that meant for them. And I'm weirdly invested. I want to hear about the laws. I want to hear what the judges are deciding, and I have nothing to do with this. And I don't know if it is the knowledge that is bringing entertainment or the entertainment value on vice versa, but either way, I'm here for it.
No, I am too, and I think it's kind of like a counteract to there being so many opinions based on nothing that I find myself being excited when someone's like, "I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm a behavioral scientist," and so I'm like I'm sat when I hear those words.
Yes, I think we all are. And you're listening to House of Content, the podcast where we break down what's really happening on your social For You page. And as you might have already noticed, we are talking today about the rise of expert creator. So the question for today that we're exploring is if we're entering the expert era of creators. So who really gets to be expert online today? Because it feels like there are those creators who have kind of learned to do things themselves, like the makeup artists and like videographers, and then there are the people who have actually professional degrees on it and have like tons of years of experience. So we're seeing kind of like a multitude of different experts. So like what makes an expert online?
I think that's a good question. So, actually, I don't know if you saw the news coming out of China maybe a few months ago, where their government actually banned creators from talking about certain topics. Like, I think medicine was one of them, unless you had an actual degree there, which I think is very interesting. I I think that it all ties also into the rise of LinkedIn as an expert platform, because there the content that you're creating, the topics that you're talking about are directly tied to what role, what title, what job history you actually have on your profile. So I think there is that connection between your professional self and then the content that you're putting out, and that's the good side of it. I think the challenging side of it is that I was listening to one of these LA lifestyle podcasts, and I'm not going to name which one, but one of the hosts was telling their audience about the importance of pap smears, and that you, as an adult woman, you have to get one every year to potentially catch anything, anything that's going on, or anything cancerous. And I instantly thought to myself, like, my because I just went to my doctor, and the guidelines actually are, and please check these with your doctor as well. I'm not a doctor, but there is, like, if there is a cutoff where, like, if you've had a certain amount, it's actually every 5 years for adult women. And I thought to myself, like, this is so dangerous, because you're like panicking now potentially audiences of young women or women who are listening, because again, like, you do not have a medical degree and you're talking about this. So I'm kind of like, we I think we are heading towards the direction where we're listening more to the actual expert, but then there's still a lot of pseudo expertise online.
I mean, the health space is tricky because I listened to another podcast that started to say, also in the space of women's health, that squishing your boob can cause cancer, and
Oh my
they started
god,
to
yeah.
debate whether mammographs are actually like more hurtful for you and could contribute to
No.
it. And so it's like, yes, I think your question was who can be an expert on social, and I think the answer is that anyone can, right now. And there's sort of upsides to that, with you being able to create your own sort of like expertise and niche and all the things we hear talked about. But the platforms aren't enforcing you to disclose your credentials. It's sort of up to you how do you word them. It's sort of up to you how you look at actual research, and how you sort of like talk about the takeaway of it. And a lot of times there is like a research that has been done, but it's not really that accurate, or it's been done with sort of a small group of people, and then an expert of so-called topic on social sort of takes the headline of that and runs with it. And so I think the tricky part is that there is no way to ensure that the people speaking about certain topics have the legitimate credentials to talk about them. But there's positives to, hearing different sides, but I think it's a bit of a wild west for sure.
That is so true. And I think if we like zoom out a little bit, like kind of like now that we are entering this expert era, like obviously like we have had people sharing advice since the beginning of YouTube days. It kind of feels like internet is kind of going back to something that, was happening
In
then.
some
Like
ways, yeah.
yeah, like back then when we had a lot of creators, like it was everyone was teaching some skills. Or I would say like majority were like, like we had the makeup tutorials, the photography, coding, cooking, like tech reviews. You had to almost be able to teach something to be able to succeed. But then like Instagram and TikTok, when the short form videos became a huge thing, like that kind of changed also the culture toward more like personality and more about lifestyle and relatability. But it kind of feels like now the pendulum is swinging again, except like the experts aren't just people who are passionate about those topics anymore. A lot of them are like actual professionals with degrees. So it's kind of like those professions are coming creator niches. And what I really find fascinating is to see the variety of it all. Like it's not just one kind of expert. It feels like every field has suddenly someone explaining it online. And I think that's really cool also because you kind of get a glimpse of like what this profession is about. Remember when we were students and when we kind of had to pick, like decide what we want to study
We
when we
just pick
grow
it
up.
blind.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. We just pick it blind. Like this
Completely.
sounds cool, but like you can literally now study even entire professions through these personalities online, and that's really cool.
Maybe I have a bit of a doomsday way of looking at it, because I saw someone question on LinkedIn whether thought leadership even exists yet because of AI. And that sort of blew my mind a little bit, because if you think about all these experts just getting their hot takes fed back to them from AI, it starts to get a little like, ooh, who's actually talking here? Because
Mm.
everyone can be an expert in a topic now, having AI as their partner to talk about it. And so that may be also influencing why we're seeing it. And it's also then paired up with sort of this push to monetize everything that you're doing. And so, yes, anyone who is interested in any topic can sort of get to a pretty expert level with the help of AI. And then I also saw a creator on TikTok talking about how they're not going to necessarily be saving for their children's education, because it's very unlikely that university or college would make sense because of AI. And I started to get on this crazy rabbit hole about, what is actually happening to thought leadership and knowledge and expertise if everyone's kind of in the same starting point with AI. Like, you don't have to memorize it, which is what the education system was sort of like based on.
Yes, but I think in a lesser or less dramatic way, we could have made those same claims when Google came about. Like now you don't have to go to the
Mm-hmm.
library and you can find all of this information just by Googling. I think what separates, and you can tell so easily on LinkedIn, like who's like, I'm sorry, but this is just you and ChatGPT chatting and it like sounds pseudo intellectual versus lived in experience. And so for me, at
Mm-hmm.
least, the people that I follow on a professional level, they're breaking down things that AI could never. For example, a friend of mine who also started Creator Match, the B2B influencer agency, AJ Exine, is sharing, he's literally breaking down how much their company retreat at South by Southwest cost and what they spent money on and why and was it worth it. You can't pull that from AI. So if you're just talking about sort of the nebulous flush over your industry, AI. But if you're talking about lived experiences, conferences, conversations with clients, failures, that's something that's very human. And I think one thing that I want to go back to, Mel, with your explanation of the evolution of going from these experts to then lifestyle influencers to then back experts again, I think we're also seeing this expertise as an aesthetic type of creator where it is mashing. And I think this is kind of a good thing and an interesting thing where we're bringing expertise into the realm of also of lifestyle. Like lifestyle is now it's
Mm-hmm.
conferences, lifestyle it's like summits, events, professional dinners, and how those are put together. Like even for me, I'm organizing an event at the time that we're recording tomorrow, and we're thinking through the aesthetic and the vibe of what we're showing on everything that we've printed out, and the videos that we're going to produce, and the photography and everything. And so we're kind of like seeing like, yes, expertise era, but it's sprinkled with the influencer lens in a way.
Yeah, which like
Right.
makes it a lot more approachable. And like you talked about how, we picked our professions kind of blind. It is really cool that some of these areas that weren't that sexy are getting a lot more sort of like popular through the aesthetics and sort of building this additional layer, making it interesting, breaking down the expertise almost through content that can be entertainment, which is what we're obviously seeing with the lawyers, right? And so it has sort of a positive effect to it. But also, if I reflect back to what I said on AI and what you said about lived experience, like that's another thing that isn't possible yet without that human touch, without the personality. We're getting this entertainment, lived experience, and expertise mashed together. These people understand who they're talking to. They're not generically talking about their topic. They're talking to a very specific, group that is interested in the topic, but also sort of aspirationally maybe is drawn towards the person, right?
Yeah. So, like, I think how we could sum it up is kind of like the creators who can really succeed as these expert creators have to have two things at the same time. Like, they have to have the real expertise, but they also need to have that skill to turn their knowledge into engaging content. And the reality is that most people do not have these, like, both of these skills. That's why we see people using AI trying to acquire the skills and trying to like talk about things that they don't actually have deep knowledge about. And but I do think it's powerful that people who have that expertise, like who are, for example, lawyers and have never even set their foot on social media, that they can actually start using AI kind of like as a tool to learn how to make engaging content. Not to say that that's the only thing you can do. Obviously you need to still like, you know, like start experimenting yourself and seeing what's working, but I think it can help you maybe learn to make more engaging content, because those like a lot of people know incredible things, but they just don't know how to translate that for the internet.
But then funnily enough, like to me even, all I need is a good like good personality, right? Like you have like something on camera, and then like you can literally just be walking down the streets of New York. Like there's this one immigration attorney actually who goes up against ICE a lot. I think he is New York based, and he's just like so sassy and so funny, and he will just like film these like walking on the street and telling what just happened in court. There's nothing fancy, there isn't a hook, there isn't a like great editing or image and caption overlays. He's just really entertaining. So like there is like the layer of having tools that you can actually produce higher quality, better edited content. But there's also the thing of like, again, like we're going back to the very fundamentals of having personality and storytelling skills. And like
Mm-hmm.
if you don't start there,
Mm-hmm.
like no amount of AI is going to make you interesting.
And
No,
I
that's
think
spot
that in
on.
this like transition, I think the first group that really did it well was doctors and sort of like estheticians, I feel like, because
Dermatologists.
Mm-hmm.
dermatologist and it was so interesting because I feel like that was like the first wave, I feel like. And they reached a point that I aspired to get to as well, in the sense that people started tagging them in content unrelated to them. So they became so much so of an expert that when you were watching other content, you wanted their take. And I think that's still a really cool, like, goalpost for an expert to have, that you become so trusted and known in a specific topic that people start to ask for your take on things. And that's still on my like mental vision board of like, that would be cool, similarly to being a local at a restaurant. But you're just
Yeah.
known,
Yeah.
and people want to hear your take, and I think that's still really cool.
That makes me think of Molly McPherson. She's like a PR crisis expert, and
Yeah.
whenever something is like, if a celebrity statement or a brand apology goes viral, like people immediately tag her, and she'll analyze it, and she gives her take on what the statement is trying to do, and like what's working and what isn't, and like what they should have said instead. So like I love seeing these breakdowns, and it's like and she's not someone who's just pretending to know PR. Like she's an actual PR professional who just turned her expertise into content, and like people are eating it up. And like I think 10 years ago, if we had heard that there's like we literally will have a person just breaking down like PR crisis, and like we're all like obsessed with it, like I don't think we could have like foreseen that, like the reality that we're living in. But I love it. But okay, so clearly expert creators are having a huge moment right now, but I think the interesting question is like, why is this shift happening right now? Like, why does this content feel so much more refreshing compared to traditional influencer content that we've kind of been consuming the past like 5 or so years?
I think because there is this shift of the saturation of the lifestyle content creation. There's just so many people, and it gets pretty surface level pretty fast. Like it was interesting following these creators' lives and seeing them rise from like Alex Earl from the college dorms all the way to dating Tom Brady, right? So there is this sort of story arc, and even seeing kind of like peeking how like keeping up with the Joneses, like how are people living on like different tax brackets, or even like tax brackets way beyond where you could be. But I think there's also a saturation where, as brands started hiring these people more and more, it kind of became less about the life and more about the proximity to like pushing this like consumerist, like just consume and hauls and shopping. And it gets pretty vapid pretty quickly. And so then there's this almost like this like yearning back. If I look, for example, specifically in fashion, it's not interesting, at least not to me, to see a person who can buy the entire Fendi collection and see like style them. Like that is not aspirational versus like I follow this vintage creator, Nick Polina. I actually met her at an event about a few years ago. Really interesting person who's built a business around selling a really profitable business. I think she said sold over $1 million worth clothing the past year online, and she sells vintage clothing, and she's talking about the process of like how she's procuring, and she's creating content for other vintage resellers, but then she also has a very interesting sense of style, and that depth and that expertise tied in with the fashion, right, is very different than like seeing somebody just like drop $10,000 in a store.
And you, as the B2B queen, may agree with this, but I think it also is because content that is coming from these other spaces has just gotten better and has started to reach the entertainment level of the like influencer content that was just servicing like, oh, I'm Alex Earl and I'm doing my makeup in my dorm, and you've got other women watching that from an entertainment perspective. Like the content now related to the way that she launched her brand is way more interesting from the business POV. Like I actually saw another breakdown. It wasn't a PR person potentially. I can't remember who did it, unfortunately, but it was basically a breakdown of everything that the brand launch sort of did and the team did, and how she would have done it better. And again, it's getting to, we could just be watching like, oh, pretty photos, but the content that's breaking down how something was done, or putting their expertise against it. And it was actually really good because the Alex Earl skincare brand launched. And first, we saw this content from our advertising and marketing group because, there's pretty
I saw it
innovative.
on LinkedIn first.
Exactly, right? There's innovative uses of, outdoor media that got attention and sort of like connecting the dots between that and, social media and even like influencer unboxing and stuff like that. But then this breakdown was getting into why it wasn't a very authentic way to launch the brand in this person's point of view. And they were basically saying like, you know, there's not a lot of mentions. We all know what medication she's on, and so to not mention everything that has influenced her skincare journey in a website that only talks and makes it seem like it was this product that cleaned her skin,
Mm,
when like the fans know more, is inauthentic. And it went deep to break down like the website, the rollout, the messaging, the each component. And it's just interesting to me that like that kind of content is almost more exciting to watch than just seeing the actual billboard itself or her social post about it. And so I think it's about the content in the B2B or expertise spaces getting better, and people be more interested in the backstory and what goes into things rather than just that one video where someone's doing their makeup.
What is also interesting is that like because I saw the same exact video. I didn't like check her credentials or anything. Like I really liked her POV on that and like what she would have done better. But I have seen some creators doing these breakdowns that don't aren't necessarily even professionals. They just seem to have like a really good taste and they are just maybe like really into marketing. And that is actually really like great way to even build your portfolio. Like if you do want to start working in marketing, like making these videos in public, or even as a designer, if you don't have any experience but you're just, maybe you are a student or maybe you're just obsessed about design, like you can kind of build your
you're
credentials
learning as you
also.
create.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm sure if she does more of those videos, I don't know if she's actually already working um, like in advertising or in marketing. It probably is because it was a really good breakdown. But even if she's just trying to get into industry, like it's going to be super beneficial for her.
That's how I feel
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Girl
And I
Boss
think that
Town like created her career
she was a
in the
pioneer.
space.
Mm.
Yeah, because she
Yeah.
was doing videos where it was sort of like her take on what a brand should do, and then she turned that into partnerships and is sort of in an advisory role in a lot of cases. So you're absolutely right. And I think that goes full circle to our beginning, where it's like technically anyone can just start and be an expert. And there's positives to that, building a career, forging your own path. But at the same time,
Pivoting.
yeah, you're starting out, you don't necessarily have the sort of legitimate credentials, which gets tricky in topics like health, right? Less
I
so
agree.
but maybe in marketing, because you as a consumer have a point of view that it actually is pretty valid, right?
Yep, yep. And I would say even, even for me, when we started this podcast, one of the reasons that I wanted to start it was that I was very passionate about the creator economy. I wanted to pivot my career towards it and become a voice and an expert in it. And so I don't think I necessarily was that when we started, but we were studying these topics, we're discussing, debating them. And so that was a way also to build expertise. Now, pivoting a little bit again, I want to talk about also this sort of parody expertise and pseudo, not pseudo. I say parody is maybe the better word, but have you heard of bimbo stoicism on TikTok? Have you stumbled upon it?
No.
It's this one creator who is she's creating these really interesting videos around kind of like fighting patriarchal ideals or beauty ideals where everybody has to have the cute button nose and big lips and like botox, everything botox, right? And she's kind of like she has this like very strong Slavic accent, and she's kind of creating almost a philosophy around fighting those types of beauty ideals, but it's very fun and it's very um subversive, I would say, as well. And then the other one is like just like straight up, I would say, comedy, but it kind of is maxed almost as expertise. Is I don't know if you've seen the whole Catching Print. Have you seen it?
No.
So
No.
so there is this dating coach Anwar, who is like, I believe he's gay, he's queer, but he specifically creates content for women and black women on like dating tips, right? But he has this whole series on Catching Print, which is I don't know if I can say it on the podcast, but kind of like
Spill it.
assessing men's packages essentially when they're wearing clothes. But he has like he's put together these whole like graphs and illustrations, and he's like, let's do a test together now. And then it's just like, at least on like my side of the internet, it's like everybody's creating content around that. And I'm just thinking, uh, like a newer one of these like D2C men's underwear brands needs to hire him, because it's like it's such an interesting corner of the internet. But that is all to say, like there is also this like level of fun and playfulness in
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
expertise as well.
100%. So just to kind of like sum it up for creators, if you are aspiring to become a creator in this era where people are gravitating toward expertise, like we already said, like you don't need to have like a PhD in a topic, but it kind of helps if you're obsessed in something, like whether it's money, branding, tech, parenting, whatever. You don't necessarily have to already be an expert, but you just need to be obsessed and wanting to learn more about it, because people also do love following a journey and just, you doing it publicly. So the opportunity that creators have now is shifting from just being known for their personality is to be known for something. And it doesn't mean that lifestyle creators are going to be going away, but audiences are definitely demanding a little bit more substance, or they're expecting a bit more substance. But I would like to just take a moment to talk a little bit about what does this mean for brands, because I do think that this shift is actually really interesting. Because if you look at the past, like if you look at the past like 5 years, or even the past decade, like the brands have basically been trying to act like influencers, like they were trying to be funny and relatable and memeable, like shout out Ryanair and Duolingo, like basically kind of competing in the entertainment game. But if people are now starting to like want to see more of these like expert content and more of the substance, like brands also need to kind of start rethinking their role on social, right? Because brands do know a lot, way more than they usually share. So what do you think about the opportunity that this gives?
Having just come from judging amazing work and looking at work that's getting awarded in our industry, I feel like one case that comes to mind from brands is Vaseline Verified. And what they
Mm.
did in that case is obviously they saw a lot of people using their products in a questionable way, and they sort of decided to get those validated in the lab. And so I like that idea because the brand has a clear expertise role in it, but they were doing it in service of people in a way. And I think that there's a huge opportunity for brands to either identify people that can bring some of that expertise to the feeds in an entertaining way. Those people are not always the same. Like, you may not be able to take a scientist and have them be the most charismatic person on camera, but you may actually find somebody who would love to do that. And there's other formats, and I think there's sort of creativity in how you bring that expertise to life, how you become an expert in something. But I feel like from a content perspective and like seeing how people may need it like they did in a way is a good avenue to start from, versus like, we are an expert in this and we want to talk about this, like really looking at what the audience needs. And they sort of identified that there's almost like a lot of danger in how some people are using the product if they don't kind of step in, and that was very well received by people. So I think that's a good example of how you may go about it in a big way.
And there's also, I think I read that L'Oreal, one of the biggest groups that they're looking to engage are dermatologists who are creators on social. So there definitely is a layer in a strategy to having different pools. And I've seen this also with expert hair care, where they actually have they have different programs with hair care or hair influencers, and then separately they work with professionals as well on content, so it almost becomes like a tier in their influencer strategy, which I think is interesting. And I'm also seeing this with the inquiries and deals that are coming my way. For example, later in the spring I'm partnering with a creator tech platform, and so that is directly again tied back into maybe the expertise that I've built or the image that I've built, discussing all these topics every week with you, but then also being able to then extend that perspective and POV once I start creating content for this technology. So I definitely think it's becoming almost like a tiered strategy to creator marketing.
So I think it's time to move on, pitch on the house segment that we have where we share ideas for creators and brands. So my pitch for, I would say, a skincare brand would be to really show the development of the product, like, and the process that it took long from the idea to actually bring it to people. Like I feel like there's just so much that we don't get to actually find out. Like they just tell that it's 100% vegan, like not tested with animals, but like how did that product actually come to life? Like I would love to have a little bit more transparency around that. And I feel like if a brand was actually able to show the process, like they would just have me as their customer. I mean, obviously if the process is something that I, feel good about, but I want to see a skincare brand be more transparent about their product innovation.
My pitch on the house is for LinkedIn, the platform. I want them to create a year-long ambassador program where maybe selfishly, but they pick doesn't need to be me, can be somebody else, rising like up and coming creators in different niches in B2B and on LinkedIn. And they actually follow the journey as they're growing those platforms up through content through the course of a year. And maybe you'll have like brand trips or events or dinners, you're bringing these people together. But I think what's really interesting, at least for other people trying to create it in the space, is hearing and seeing the journey before you're
Mm-hmm.
big, right? Like what does
Yeah,
it take when you're doing your
totally.
first brand deals versus like you've already done them all?
My idea is for a supplement brand ritual that has really led the way on transparency. The supplement space, obviously, also a little Wild Westy because a lot of that stuff isn't regulated. So I feel like them as a leader of like really being intentional about where the ingredients and things are coming from. I want to see someone like ordering questionable things and unpacking like the worst case scenarios of where they've come from. I already saw a version of this for
Spicy.
skincare on Amazon, and they tested that there was like urine and stuff in the fake
Oh, no.
cosmetics and skincare that you were just getting from Amazon, and they broke down and like literally took it to the lab. So in the same way, I want someone to do that for supplements. And I'm a little terrified to know, but I feel like we need this transparency because it's probably not going to be done by the FDA, you know?
It is not, and I would definitely watch that.
Me too.
All right, that was a fun one. As always, thanks for hanging out with us. And if you enjoyed this episode, share with someone who also lives on their For You page as much as we do. And you've been listening to House of Content, and we'll see you next time.